At 5 minutes past 5 in the morning on March 4, 2026, 180 Iranian sailors woke up to the smell of salt air somewhere in the Indian Ocean, 2,000 miles from home, and none of them had any reason to believe they were in danger. Their ship, the IRIS Dena, was heading back to Iran after attending a massive international naval parade in India. 74 countries had been invited. The Indian Navy had welcomed them with a ceremony, put their sailors in a parade, posted photos on social media. A United States Navy admiral had attended the same event. Everything was formal, ceremonial, diplomatic, the kind of thing that happens when militaries want to talk without actually talking. The IRIS Dena was 40 nautical miles south of Galle, Sri Lanka, running at normal transit speed through international waters, when a single torpedo detonated beneath her stern. The explosion lifted the back of the ship clean out of the water. The hull broke. The vessel sank within minutes. That is what Pete Hegseth, the United States Secretary of Defense, described to journalists at the Pentagon on March 4th as a, quote, quiet death. And here is the question nobody in the mainstream press has fully answered yet. If this was just a military operation against an enemy ship, why did the United States choose to sink it there, in those specific waters, at that specific moment, just hours after it left Indian territory? Before that question gets answered, let us understand exactly what happened below the surface. The IRIS Dena was not a simple patrol boat. She was a MOJ-class frigate, 1,500 tons, launched in 2015 and commissioned in 2021. The newest surface warship in the Iranian Navy. She carried 4 Qaeda anti-ship missiles. She carried Sayad surface-to-air missiles. She had torpedo tubes, a 76mm main gun, a 40mm gun, and a 3-dimensional phased array radar. She was not a fishing vessel. She was a warship. She was also coming home from the biggest multilateral naval exercise in the Indian Ocean that year, the Milan 2026 exercise, the International Fleet Review, events organized by India, events the United States had been invited to and chose not to send ships to. American officers attended, but no American vessels. That decision, which seemed bureaucratic at the time, now looks like something else entirely. Because what we now know is that somewhere below the surface of the Indian Ocean, a United States Navy fast attack submarine had been following the IRIS Dena, tracking her, waiting. The submarine's identity has not been released. The Pentagon confirmed only that it was a fast attack boat and that it used a single Mark 48 advanced capability torpedo. The class of submarine could be a Virginia, a Los Angeles, or a Seawolf. Any of those boats can remain submerged for months, running silent at speeds exceeding 30 knots, invisible to radar, invisible to air assets, detectable only by other submarines with specialized equipment. On the surface, the Indian Ocean looked peaceful. Underneath, a predator was watching a target it had already decided to kill. The Mark 48 torpedo costs $4.2 million. It is a wire-guided weapon designed not to hit a ship directly, but to detonate beneath the ship's keel. The physics are brutal and precise. When the warhead detonates below the hull, it creates a gas bubble roughly the size of a bus that expands and then collapses in milliseconds. That collapse creates a shockwave that travels upward through the water and slams into the ship's structural spine. Think of it like taking a wooden ruler, holding both ends, and snapping it from below. The ship does not just get a hole in its side, its back breaks. The IRIS Dena, 1,500 tons of steel, was split apart from underneath in seconds. 32 survivors were rescued by the Sri Lankan Navy. 87 bodies were recovered from the water. More than 100 crew members were never found. Now here is where the official story starts showing cracks. The United States Central Command, which is running Operation Epic Fury, the broader military campaign against Iran, covers the Arabian Sea, the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz. That is Fifth Fleet territory. But the IRIS Dena was not sunk in Fifth Fleet territory. She was sunk in Seventh Fleet territory. The Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean, 2,500 kilometers from the nearest active combat zone around the Strait of Hormuz. Military analysts at the war zone noted that this geographic detail is significant beyond the kill itself. Conducting a submarine strike inside 7th Fleet's area of operations while a 5th Fleet operation is ongoing requires coordination between two separate fleet commands, likely White House-level authorization, and a deliberate decision to extend the war geographically in a way that had not previously occurred. This was not a reactive engagement. This was planned. Former Indian Foreign Secretary Kanwal Sibal wrote on social media that the attack was, in his words, premeditated, because the United States was fully aware of the Iranian ship's presence at the Indian naval exercise, to which American officers had been personally invited. He wrote that the United States may have withdrawn its ships from the exercise precisely with this operation in mind. Think about that for a moment. The Indian Navy publicly announced the IRIS Dena's arrival in Visakhapatnam on February 17th. The ship's movements were tracked by at least 2 navies. She was in port for 8 days. She left, and within hours of clearing Indian waters, she was dead. Sushant Singh, a lecturer in South Asian Studies at Yale University, told CNN that the sinking represented what he called a massive blow to New Delhi's regional credibility. India had invited this ship. India had paraded these sailors. India had photographed them and posted it publicly. And then, while the ship was still within India's self-described maritime sphere of influence, a United States submarine hunted her down and sank her without warning. Indian defense expert Brahma Chelane wrote that by targeting a vessel returning from an Indian-hosted exercise, Washington had effectively turned India's maritime neighborhood into a war zone. He called it a violation of what he described as the unwritten code of naval hospitality, which holds that attacking a ship immediately after it leaves a host nation's waters is a diplomatic slight to that host. India has not publicly protested. India has not summoned the American ambassador. India has said nothing official, which raises a question that analysts in Delhi are very carefully not saying out loud. Was India warned in advance? And if so, what does that silence mean? There is a second question that nobody in the Western press is pressing on, and it comes from a former United States Air Force targeting expert named Wes Bryant. Bryant was not a casual observer. He was the former chief of civilian harm assessments at the Pentagon, the man whose job it was to evaluate whether strikes were legal, and he said clearly and publicly that the attack on the IRIS Dena was illegal. His reasoning was specific. The IRIS Dena was not engaged in hostilities at the time of the strike. She was transiting international waters on a return voyage from a diplomatic event. She had not fired at anyone. She had not entered any designated exclusion zone. She had not been warned. She was not given the opportunity to surrender, which under the laws of naval warfare is generally required before sinking an enemy vessel that is not actively threatening you. Bryant asked, publicly, was that warship actively posing a threat or participating in hostilities? And he answered his own question. You cannot say that this warship was an imminent threat to anyone. By targeting it, he asked, is the Trump administration saying that the imminent threat is all of Iran's government and military, everywhere in the world, at all times? The Pentagon did not respond to that question. Pete Hegseth stood at the podium and called it a quiet death. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said it was a demonstration of America's global reach to hunt, find, and kill, in his words, an out-of-area deployer, and that this was something only the United States can do at this type of scale. That phrasing, out-of-area deployer, is the kind of language that reveals more than it intends to. It frames any Iranian military vessel anywhere in the world as a legitimate target, regardless of whether it is doing anything threatening. Under that logic, an Iranian training ship sailing to South America or a hospital ship in the Pacific would be a valid target. That is not a fringe interpretation. That is what the words mean. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi put it more plainly. He wrote that the United States, in his words, perpetrated an atrocity at sea, 2,000 miles from Iran's shores. He wrote that frigate Dena, as he called her, was a guest of India's navy carrying almost 130 sailors and was struck in international waters without warning. He then wrote, "Mark my words, the United States will come to bitterly regret the precedent it has set." On the same day, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced it had struck a United States tanker in the northern Gulf of Arabia, which was on fire. The IRGC General Qiomaz Haidari announced that Iran had decided to fight Americans, in his words, wherever they are. A second Iranian warship appeared off the coast of Sri Lanka the following morning, with more than 100 crew aboard. Sri Lanka's cabinet spokesperson said the government was doing its utmost to safeguard lives on that vessel, without specifying what threat it might face. The implication was understood by every government in the region. Here is the number that puts the entire operation into context. The Mark 48 torpedo that sank the IRIS Dena cost $4.2 million. The IRIS Dena herself represented years of Iranian engineering, approximately $150 million to build, and was the crown of their surface fleet. In the same week, United States and Israeli air forces destroyed over 20 Iranian naval vessels, including an Iranian submarine and a drone carrier. General Dan Kane declared at the Pentagon podium that Iran's navy was, in his words, effectively neutralized. Pete Hegseth went further. He said Iran's navy was, in his exact words, combat ineffective, decimated, destroyed, defeated. In less than 1 week, a naval force that had taken Iran 30 years to build was gone. But here is the thing about the IRIS Dena that reframes everything you just heard. The submarine did not sink her because she was a threat in that moment. She was heading home. She had no orders to engage anyone. She had just spent 8 days attending a peace exercise. The submarine sank her because sinking her sent a message that no missile strike, no air bombardment, no diplomatic statement could send as clearly. The message was this: there is no safe water for you. There is no distance far enough. There is no diplomatic event attended far enough away from the war. If a United States submarine decides you are a target, the Indian Ocean is not a sanctuary. The Pacific is not a sanctuary. 2,000 miles is not far enough. The only thing standing between you and a Mark 48 torpedo is a decision made in a command center you cannot see, by a government you cannot negotiate with in that moment, based on criteria it has not fully disclosed. Sri Lanka found the bodies in white sheets in the water. The oil slick spread for miles. An ambulance drove them to the Karapitia hospital in Galle. 32 men who were alive told the Sri Lankan Navy they were hit by a submarine. They had heard nothing. There was no warning. One moment the ship was moving. The next moment, the stern lifted out of the water and the sea came in. The commander of the IRIS Dena survived. Some of his senior officers survived. They told the Sri Lankan Navy what happened, and the Sri Lankan Navy quietly confirmed it to Reuters before the Pentagon made its official statement. The Sri Lankan Air Force and Navy chose not to release their own footage of the rescue, citing the sensitivity of having the military of another state involved. Sri Lanka is not at war with anyone. Sri Lanka is a small island nation that received a distress call and sent its boats out to pull bodies from the water. Its foreign minister stood in parliament and said only that a vessel called IRIS Dena had reported an explosion and was sinking. He did not say who had done it. He did not have to. By then, everyone knew. What nobody knows yet, and what the coming weeks will answer, is whether the sinking of the IRIS Dena actually ended Iran's ability to project naval power globally, or whether it simply removed the one ship that was visible, traceable, and legally indefensible to protect, while creating a precedent that every navy in the world is now silently calculating. The precedent is not just about Iran. It is about what it means to transit international waters while classified as an enemy state. It is about whether the laws of naval warfare that have existed since the Second World War still apply when a nuclear-powered submarine and a $4.2 million guided torpedo are involved. It is about whether India, which watched one of its guests get sunk in its own maritime neighborhood and said nothing, made a calculation, or suffered an insult it has not yet decided how to answer. 180 men went to work on a Tuesday morning at sea. 32 came home. The rest are somewhere in the Indian Ocean at 2,000 feet. The IRIS Dena was the newest ship in Iran's fleet. She was also, as of March 4, 2026, the last Iranian surface warship known to be operating outside the Persian Gulf. There are no more. The Iranian Navy that existed last week does not exist this week. What replaces it, and how and where, is the question that every intelligence agency in the world is now trying to answer. If what happened to the IRIS Dena interests you, understand that the story does not end in the Indian Ocean. The same week this happened, the United States and Israeli aircraft hit targets inside Iran itself for the first time in this conflict, and Iran responded with missile and drone strikes on multiple countries in the Middle East. What you just watched was not the end of something. It was the demonstration of a capability that the United States wanted every Navy commander on Earth to see and understand. The question is what they do with that understanding.